For listeners of this podcast since the beginning, you may recall in season 1, I talked about how some of my best ideas come to me when I'm immersed in water. So today, I took myself to the pool and then I sat in the sauna. Lots of ideas, lots of memories came to the surface. I was reminded of sophomore year, 2004, college, my first kind of boyfriend, who I incidentally gave my virginity to. And he was a humanities scholar, a philosopher, if you will. And I remembered back then, or I remember today how I felt back then about the whole thing, which was very much an indoctrination of my immigrant working class parents, which was, you're going to go study something practical. What good can philosophy do for you, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that guy today runs a venture capital fund or a hedge fund or something out in Connecticut, absolutely loaded. But back then he was a philosopher and he would bury himself in -2, -3 of the WashU library, immersed in texts. And anyway, that's a fun intro because today we have a philosopher here, a fantastic philosopher, a man of many talents, if you will, also a poet. I'll do a proper bio in a bit, but that's a little bit funky.
So
right?
I'm introduced by you linking me to the man you incidentally, I quote, incidentally lost your virginity to.
Not
how,
lost,
how do you lose?
Gave.
How does one give one's virginity away incidentally?
Well, I mean, it was
What's
like
the incidental aspect of
incidentally,
this whole affair?
he happens to have been a philosopher, and you're a philosopher. So
yeah, but that wasn't quite what you said. What you said is, incidentally, this is the person I gave my virginity to.
Well, I guess the incidentally was misplaced. I'm really speaking from the bottom of my heart here. Yes.
Is it?
What? Well, okay. Well, this is Jeremy Fogel on with us.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Amy. Hello, Dor. Hello, US of A.
Hello, Dad.
Hello, Dad. Who's Dad?
My dad.
Hi, Dad. Do you know that your daughter gave her virginity away incidentally? That's quite
to a
fraud.
very attractive,
I'm sure
young,
he was.
handsome. He looked like a better version of Bob Dylan, with like the curls and the blue eyes. He was very, very, very handsome.
I don't think there's such a thing as a better version of Bob Dylan, to be fair.
He was,
but
honestly, I think there's a lot of versions that are better than Bob Dylan. I'm not the biggest Bob Dylan fan.
Aren't you?
I'm not.
All right, that's incidental then.
Today's episode is brought to us by Zahav Jewelry with 1L. Hi, and welcome to October 7th, Emotionally Raw coverage. Today is March 6th. It's the 152nd day of the war, and joining us is Jeremy Fogel, or should I say Dr. Jeremy Fogel, who teaches at Tel Aviv University's Department of Jewish Philosophy, as well as its School of Education. He is the academic director of Alma, teaches at the Kibbutzim College of Education, Technology, and the Arts, and lectures publicly on philosophy in various forums. Jeremy holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy from the University of Cambridge and a master's degree and doctorate in philosophy from Tel Aviv University. His doctoral research explored the tension between universalism and particularism in modern Jewish philosophy, focusing on the Jewish German philosophers Moses Mendelssohn and Hermann Cohen.
This is going to give the wrong impression, I fear. I think this bio is going to give the wrong impression. But please go on. I didn't mean to interrupt.
And he continued exploring these issues as a post-doctoral fellow at
Yes,
Hamburg
he did.
University.
Yes, he did.
He's involved with several independent
He
artistic...
explored the issues.
He's involved with several independent...
Woke up in the morning, explored the issues, went out for lunch, and then explored the issues some more.
I recall asking you before this whether I could use this bio.
Yeah, no, it's also somewhat out of date. Please continue.
His first book, Tel Aviv is Water,
Yes.
and Other Seasidian Thoughts, was
Yes.
published by Hava Lehaba in 2019.
Oh,
And a few months ago, his book, Jewish Universalisms, Mendelssohn, Cohen, and Humanity's Highest Good was released. He
Right.
also is the co-host and co-creator of the Think and Drink Different podcast, which is in Hebrew for our
Yes.
Hebrew listeners.
just host. Co-creator, but just host.
He's a wild card.
I'm a wild card.
I've been very excited about today's meeting, but I've also been a little nervous
Why?
because we did not prep. I like doing a prep call before.
Do you now?
I do. And you We're very evasive and mysterious.
I am.
So this is like Door's wet dream because I came in with like no pieces of paper today. And this is just going to be like way from the bottom of my heart. I don't know how much you're going to enjoy, Jeremy, but I'm also kind of wild and feral.
I am both Door's wet dream as well as linked intrinsically to the person you incidentally gave your virginity to. This is a lot of pressure, I feel.
You've been into Freud lately, so this is a lot of sex on the brain. You should be enjoying this tremendously.
Well, I'm just taking note of the facts.
Well, recently I attended 2 of your lectures at Beit Radical,
yes,
which has an agenda that relates to dealing with, calamities, but having a positive mindset about the future, blah, blah, blah. You were outstanding.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's very kind of you.
I would describe your lectures as like, first of all, I'll say this. It was great to have an alternative sort of date night, Date nights.
Indeed, yeah.
It used to be
I do all the talking. It takes the talking. The burden of talking is swept away from the couple.
Exactly. Also, and there's this other thing of like, oh, we went to a lecture. It's not like, oh, we just went to the bar and sat around, or oh, we just like went to blah, blah, blah. We went to a lecture. We elevated our brains. And it's also hilarious. Like, you are funny as fuck.
Thank you.
You rode in on a bicycle.
Yes. I think that was, yes, that was incidental though.
He is not going to let me live it down. The word of the day is incidental. INCIDENTAL. Incidental.
Yes. Interesting word.
Interesting. Why is it so interesting?
What does it actually mean? Incidental.
Well,
What's the
you seem
opposite
to
of incidental?
know, so why don't you tell us?
Well, you're the one who introduced the word.
Well, you're the one harping on it, so why don't you talk about it?
I don't know. What does it mean to you, Amy?
Do you want me to look it up?
Please.
Okay, I'll do it. Do, 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 do. Accompanying, but not a major part of something. Liable to happen as a consequence of an activity. Okay, maybe it was the wrong use of the word.
I don't think it was.
Maybe it was. I don't know.
So what are we talking about then?
Well, I can tell you what's on my mind lately, but I think
please.
On my mind, really, you don't want to go with what's on your mind?
No,
all right.
No. Let's roll.
So after the pool sauna, my way home, I was like, you know what? I listened to music this morning when I was working on the socials for the pod. Why don't I finish listening to that episode of Barry Weiss's podcast, Honestly, that came out a few weeks ago? It's an episode where she's meeting up with Abigail Schreier.
Hey, Barry. Hey, Abigail.
Hey, guys. So the episode title is Why the Kids Aren't All Right. And it's about how, the kids in America, they're being smothered with all the preventative mental health stuff and the talk about trauma and all this different stuff, like the social emotional learning and blah, blah, blah. And I was like along for the ride in part 1, but part 2 kind of careened off a cliff and really lost me and also pissed me off. So that's kind of what's on my mind. Should I unpack that some more, or do you want to talk about what's on your mind? I'll unpack it some more. Okay. There's 2 things there that were said. One thing was like, well, whatever makes your kids strong will make them happier. And it was an hour and 20 minutes where the word resilience wasn't used once. And that's definitely the word of the war in Israel. Chosen, resilience, strength, power. And she was basically saying the body keeps the score. That bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list, like 2 million copies sold, that whole thing about epigenetic trauma, that trauma lives in our bones, it's bullshit. That's her thesis. It's bullshit. We're basically traumatizing people with too much mental health. The kids can't function for themselves, blah, 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 blah. And then she's just like, let's take a look at Israeli combat soldiers for a second. Israeli combat soldiers have less PTSD than American combat soldiers, and that's because they have better ways of coping with it. And as the daughter, hey, Dad, I love you. As the daughter of a combat veteran who definitely, Dad, we've talked about this, has, PTSD that he doesn't want to talk about. I was just like fucking irate listening to this shit. I'm like, she's looking at us while we're in a war to like write her like controversial best-selling whatever book. And she's basically saying in Israel, people have stronger mental health. In Israel, the combat soldiers are stronger too. And it's because they keep going and they're stronger. And I'm like, no, it's actually because we didn't have the luxury of like unpacking our trauma. We don't have that space because it's not like a war that happened 50 years ago. And it's not a war that it's like every generation has to go into a war. And then you don't feel like you have the luxury of even going to mental health. Like in my family, there's a huge stigma about going to a psychologist or whatever. Even when I had an eating disorder, like full-fledged anorexia, was like, don't go to a psychologist. It'll be on your record. You're strong. You're not a weak person. So this whole idea of like, we're going to look at a completely different culture in a different country, and then we're going to extrapolate a few things that's going to help my thesis really pissed me off because like ultimately, I mean, I can imagine my father likes to say this, hey, how are you? And then like, if someone asks you, how are you? You tell them, better. And then they say, better why? And then you say, well, today is better than yesterday, and tomorrow will be better than today. Like that's my parents' mindset. I don't know if it's necessarily a better mindset. Like, I don't know. I'm thinking about it, and it's like everyone's looking at us as, oh, they're so resilient and they're just keeping on. But it's like, actually, we have tons of health issues that we're still unpacking. Like, we have no idea where endometriosis is linked to stress. Like my friends are all telling me that they're like been sicker this winter or that they're having all sorts of body ailments. Like I landed up in the fucking hospital in January. I don't know. So it's like on my mind, this kind of like rose-colored glasses at like Israel from outside and saying like, oh, we're stronger or we have a better way of dealing with things. We just don't have the resources like at an economic level in the country or anything else. Like it really pissed me off.
Does one ask questions in this podcast? What's the format?
You asked me what was on my mind.
No, actually,
I asked you what was in your mind. Then you told me what's on my mind.
Well, that's, No, but yes. No, keep on. That was nice. That was interesting. I feel that you're trying to pick a fight with Barry. Do you know Barry personally?
No, I'm not trying to pick a fight with Barry. If anything, it would be directed at Abigail.
Abigail. You don't like Abigail.
No, I mean, it's not that I don't like her.
Fucking Abigail with her bullshit ideas.
It's not that I don't like her. It's just this whole idea that like, oh, we're going to be like better off or like more well adjusted. Like kids are in like fucking safe rooms. Like in Sderot, they displaced people. They were displaced for like 4.5 months and they're sent back to Sderot. They're back in school. Then they have like air raid sirens and everyone's like, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and whatever makes you stronger makes you happier. And like, look at Israel. That's a great, like, we're the model
fucking
now. Like,
Abigail with her bullshit ideas.
Abigail, look, I respect a researcher and whatever. I'm just saying, the reason that there might be less PTSD here is because there might be less documented PTSD. That's it. That's my point.
I don't know. I don't know the research. I don't know the statistics, but I would, maybe I'm in this thing now where everybody's right. Maybe both Amy, you might be right, and Abigail, bless her heart and bless her soul, she might be right as well. And I think that, and again, I'm not an expert on American society, but I would guess that the moment anything becomes something that is that you can sell, right? And if mental health becomes a product, then it will be it will be provided to people beyond what, strictly speaking, might be good for their health, just because there's financial gains to be made, right? So she might be right in the sense that the moment mental health becomes a product, given the way American society is structured, it will be pushed down everybody's throat for financial gains. That might be the case. And it might also be the case that PTSD in Israel is diagnosed and that people here are just as traumatic or just as traumatized as anywhere else, or perhaps more so given recent history and not so recent history. I'm in this thing now where everybody's right. There's truth in every perspective. And maybe it's because of this current obsession with the word conceptia in Israel, where everybody's talking about the conception. We were wrong-headed about the nature of our geopolitical situation, and it's all about the conception. I don't know if our friends in the English-speaking world are as aware as we are of how obsessive the current Israeli discourse is with that one term, right? Conceptia. I think that's quite philosophically, it's an invitation for philosophical thought in a way. Everybody's talking in Israel about conceptia, right? The conception. The conception is the big mental enemy of the Israeli state. Everyone who's wrong, the way to say that you're wrong-headed or that your ideas suck, you say you're still stuck in the conception, in the pre-7th of October conception. And it's an interesting question to ask, what does it mean to think without a conception, right? What is that? What do people mean when they say conception? And why is it harmful to our ability to perceive reality and to act according to what the facts are or to what reality really demands? And it seems to me that conception is really a worldview, right? You have so much worldview, you don't actually view the world anymore. Because, in our actual awful events over here, you had young soldiers, young girls, young women soldiers perceiving with their eyes Hamas training for an attack, providing that intel to higher ups, and they being stuck in the conception that they wouldn't attack, that they've got no interest to attack, that they're not seeking to attack, missed on the empirical data, did not look at the empirical data, but because they were so stuck in their own conception. So conception, really, when we use it in this meaning, in this sense, in current Israeli discourse, is a situation whereby you're so in love with your own theoretical appraisal of things, you're so in love with your own worldview that you do not see the actual empirical evidence before your eyes. And so the question is how to stop thinking through conceptions, through worldviews, and which is very difficult because I don't think it's possible. We don't have access to the world as it is in and of itself. We are always looking through a certain perspective. We're always looking through a certain interpretation. But at the very least, we should try to engage with different perspectives and not only see things only through our own perspective. So to accept complexity, I think, is the opposite of thinking through a conception. For example, if I think about the reasons why the Gazan society developed in a way that, turned murderous on the 7th of October, I've got a lot of appreciation for Marxist thought. I like Marx a lot. I think that Marx was right about many things. And I think that part of the grand catastrophe, which is human civilization at the moment, is related to dynamics that he already perceived in the 19th century. So Marx would always say, go to the material substrata, right? Go to see where the money goes, right? Human beings are firstly organisms that are seeking to feed themselves. That's the basic reality of our biological existence. We have to feed ourselves. We've got these needs that we are trying to meet. And so you have to think about the very basic, crude, vulgar, biological substrata of existence, and all the rest is built upon that. So first you look at the means of production. How does a society create the wealth it needs to answer its needs? That's the basic structure. These are the foundations, and all the rest is on top of it, right? Ideology, religion, belief systems, entertainment. It's all on top of a basic substrata, and if you want to really change, you have to change that. Right? That's always the question you want to ask. So, for example, human nature is not some kind of essential, never-changing fact. It's a function of what the means of production of any given society are. So if we look at Gaza, right, it's a society where in order to succeed, you have to be part of Hamas. That's basically where the money is, right? Also because of what our governments have been doing throughout the years, which is, allowing this organization to grow and to grow rich and to become really essentially the sole source of sustenance and money in Gaza. So obviously, if the only way to make money, to feed my family is to become a Hamasnik, I'll become a Hamasnik, and I generally will also adhere to the, nihilistic ideology and fundamentalism, and I will be part of this whole party, right, of this whole event. Now, that's Marxist way of thinking. So if we would change the means of production, if the way to succeed in Gazan society would not be would not demand of me to be part of Hamas. People might develop in other ways, but you have to change the means of production. Now, if you think of a different perspective, you've got, for example, Freud, right? The repression of sexual and violent urges, the way that's mismanaged usually in very conservative societies, and, the way it comes out in perverted ways, for example, also on the 7th of October. That's also it's a very different way of looking at it, but it's also interesting. Also interesting, someone that completely contradicts Marx, maybe someone like Weber, who talked about Protestantism and the spirit of capitalism, which is the complete opposite of Marx, because Weber says that for capitalism to evolve, you needed to have an ideology. You needed to have the Protestant view of the world and the Protestant values. And the moment these things occurred in Western history, then you had the space in which capitalism could evolve, which is the opposite of what Marx says, because Marx says it always starts down, right? It always begins with the means of production. It always begins with like the material elements. And Weber says, no, here we have a grand example where the ideology is the one that causes a change in the means of production. And I say both are right. Or at the very least, both are perspectives from which it is interesting to look at the situation in order not to be stuck in any one conception. It is both the case that it could be insightful to analyze, for example, Gazan society or Israeli society or American society from a Marxist perspective. And it might also be the case that it's interesting to think about it with completely different glasses in terms of ideology, right? Because, specifically thinking about Hamas, there's also a wider ideological issue relating to fundamentalist Islam, just like there's a fundamentalist Jewish problem or fundamentalist Christian problem. It's not unique to Islam, but it's perhaps particularly relevant to us at the moment. So I'm trying to think about issues from various perspectives. And going back to our dearly beloved Abigail, that's why I'm thinking there might be something in what she's saying, and there might also be something in what you're saying. Both are insightful. So you can live at peace, Amy, with Abigail. You don't have to. You can leave that ill feeling towards Abigail. You don't have to be angry at Abigail anymore. Though, what's with the directing? If you want to say something, fucking say it. What's with the fucking the maestro directing symphony here?
The thing is, when you do this music transaction, it's really easy to edit after, because you can start a new conversation from any point if you don't like it. And if there is an energy in the room that the subject is like ending, so I think you don't need, that's enough. We can go to the next subject, if I feel that.
All right. So you can also say, let's go to the next subject. You exist. You can be part of this conversation, though. We don't have three microphones.
We are emotionally raw.
That's
coverage,
very disappointing of yours, though. I would expect you to be a man with 3 microphones.
I don't have ill will towards Abigail.
No, there
listen,
incidentally.
Listen. Hold on. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to talk about this. And then I listened to the last 2 minutes, like just before I got here.
Right.
And Barry's like, you touch the third rail of like being canceled and like what keeps you going. And she's like, well, I'm just like out there on my mission for the truth. Right. Now, I'm with you, okay? We're all in the forest and every one of us is doing something else in the forest. Me, right? I like dyeing fabric with like pigments that I take from nature, okay? Sure. Like I dyed this with onion skins, the shirt I'm wearing. Yeah.
It was white originally?
Yeah, it was white.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
Thank you very much. So if we were in the forest, right? I'd probably be like taking pictures of the flowers and collecting the eucalyptus bark. And you might be thinking about whatever you're thinking about and we're all going to do different things in this forest. And the forest is existence, okay? We can all coexist. I'm with you.
And Abigail would be burning the forest down.
No, I'm not going to burn her down. But if someone's coming at me and they're saying, my overarching principle, the thing that gets me going is that I'm looking for this concept of truth. Now, I'm not a post-truther or a pre-truther. It's just not my prevailing value system or the thing that like I've put as a priority because I'm more of like a wisdom-based oriented person than like a knowledge-oriented person. But if someone's coming out there and on the air saying like, this is absolutely true and this is the thing, I feel, not to think for a second, we'll come back to that too. I feel that it's not really an accurate depiction of what's going on. Then I feel like, you know what, I'm going to say something about it. And I respect her for doing it. I respect her for researching.
What does Abigail represent to you?
It's not a matter of
yes,
Abigail.
It is.
No, it's not.
Oh, yes, it is.
You're not a psychologist. You are a philosopher. All right? And all the PNP in the world. No.
Sometimes the psychological phenomena is so obvious.
Conception. Hold on. Regarding conception. No, because I resent the idea that, because I grew up in a house with this. I grew up in like third generation Holocaust, second generation combat PTSD. And then for someone to be like, oh, your experience was hunky dory and you didn't really like have to. It's someone who's on the air speaking authoritatively. No,
do you have any Abigails in your family?
Her name could be Bill Smith. I don't give a fuck what her name is or who she is.
Do you have any Abigails in your family?
No. Why are you so harping on this?
Did Abigail date the philosopher you gave your virginity to incidentally back in sophomore year?
Let's call him John. And no, I think he's settled down right after college. Washington University in St. Louis. So
St. Louis?
Regarding the conception.
Please.
I thought about this before that like, you know, everyone keeps talking about the conception, but there's one very famous conception, which is the Immaculate Conception of Mary.
Right.
You know, that also happened here in Israel.
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I mean, where was Mary? Where was Jesus born?
I'm sure she was here. The question whether the conception was indeed immaculate.
Well, I mean, that's what it's referred to. It's it's the Immaculate Conception.
Right, but it's a question whether factually Jesus was created without physical intercourse.
Yes, but let's assume that, I mean, the concept,
a big assumption.
The concept is the Immaculate Conception.
Yes,
that's what it's called.
Yes.
And it's that concept. How do we look at years? It's like the years after Jesus and before Jesus. And so it's kind of interesting that the kind of big bang, if you will, of the Gregorian calendar is this Immaculate Conception.
We're back talking about virginity.
Well, I guess
the incidental giving away of it.
Yeah, it's all a matter of, you know, creation, thought, conception. It's all related.
Yes, it is.
And then we wonder a lot about how we can get people to think differently. And I keep returning to this theme in our show of feeling. You know, everyone's like in their head space, but like, how can we get them into their heart space? And it's really nutty. Like, okay, let's go with that for a second, that everyone's telling like the truth or everyone's right or we're all coexisting. Lately, I've been thinking about how, you know, Hamas just said that they don't know where the hostages are. I don't know if you caught that. That happened a few days ago. But they know with certainty that like 30,000 people are dead. Like they just know. They knew after the hospital thing that it was like 500. Like there's this weird thing going on right now with like things that are presented as factual certainties and things that are just uncertain or unclear, and then all of these things are like in a mishmash, and almost no one is just saying like, hey guys, how do you know that? And you don't know where like 130 people are right now.
Right.
So it's a very weird time.
It is.
And you didn't live in the States, right?
For a while, actually.
You did?
For 3 beautiful, wonderful, lovely, amazing months. Yes.
Where?
New York.
You were in New York City?
New York. Yes, I was in New York.
That's where I was born.
It's a great, one of the greatest cities on earth. No questions about it.
So 3 months aside, you didn't, I mean, that was a nice extended stay, but I'm sure you've seen what's...
I got kicked out, unfortunately.
You got kicked out of New York?
I was going to stay. Yeah, I got kicked out at the time. Yeah. Some minor immigration problem at Atlanta airport.
Well, that's unfortunate. They kicked you out, which is a shame, but they haven't kicked out all the nutties blocking the bridges and, you know, saying that Israel's committing genocide and all the stuff going on there. Have you been following what's happening there?
Well, I think generally the wider problem in America is that it might be ruled soon by an orange rapist who's going to put an end to the liberal democratic world order. I think that's more concerning if I were American than, a bunch of kids shouting against Israel. I think
the interesting thing, though, is that these kids shouting against Israel, the progressive leftists are bringing down Biden in the polls right now.
Yeah.
So if Trump does, if
I don't think it's
liberal,
only them.
if like a liberal Democrat, whatever, is like undone, and that's the end of it, I just want to say, and like, I'm not making this up, like progressives will have something to do with it.
Sure.
Which is crazy if you think about it.
It's like Leonard Cohen's got this great little poem with a drawing. He says, "Oh, and by the way, you will not like what comes after America."
When I was there in April 2022 for an extended stay, like it was the longest I had been in New York since I left New York in 2010. I was there for a month. And I had this sensation that I was really experiencing the fall of Rome.
The fact that it's two, somewhat, the fact that there's two very elderly, with diminishing cognitive abilities, men running against each other, really does seem like some kind of grotesque fall of Rome scenario. Two like half demented old men, one of whom is just an absolute narcissist rapist. The other one, seems like a nice guy, but my grandma calls him the pager. He looks like a corpse. Joe, I wish him all the well. I wish it's my personal interest for him for his team. I think people vote for the team. I think people trust that he has a good team, but it is a kind of end of Rome decadence thing. And then, just the fact that the entertainment industry has taken over politics, the reality TV star is becoming president, is, I think, a sign of cultural decline, generally speaking.
Whereas here, I mean, maybe we don't have enough people from the entertainment industry coming into politics.
I'll take anyone. I'll take the clown from the circus against that, gentleman in charge at the moment.
Personally, I want to see Danny Kushmara running things.
Fine by me. Let Danny run. Anyone. Let the guy who runs the corner store here run the country rather than Mr. Netanyahu.
Have you heard that what's really popular with these youngins that are just like running around?
The youngins.
Yeah, the youngins. I don't know what else to call them. Like I thought it was. I'm 38, and I feel pretty young.
Right. Touch wood.
I feel pretty young. Like I'm young at heart, but now I'm just like, it's been 20 years since my rendezvous with the philosopher. Is that the right use of the word rendezvous?
Sure.
Now I feel really self-conscious about my use of words, just like my use of words generally. I'm like, are these words the right words? But anyway, it's been like, I don't know. It's been almost 20 years since I graduated college. Like that's crazy.
Amy, that's interesting about this whole philosopher. The presence of this philosopher is a purely sexual presence in our conversation.
No, we dated. We were really into each other.
But there was it's not like you started from this philosopher and then we went talking about ideas.
But I wanted to ask you.
Ideas.
You started harping on the thing. And I wanted to talk to you about whether I wanted to talk to you about philosophy and its function in our lives. Like is it something useful, to counter?
But if you wanted to ask me about philosophy, why didn't you? Has anyone been
you kind of appeared at some point. No, I'm
it?
kidding. I'm not going to blame. We're not into the blame game here on Emotionally Raw Coverage, but I do.
That's the name of the podcast?
Emotionally Raw Coverage.
Emotionally Raw Coverage?
Yeah.
Right. You don't believe in questions also?
Actually,
as it was
explained to you in the 5 minutes of prep that we had before the show.
I don't know if you have you heard our podcast. Like it's a very question-based format.
Dora, can you please explain what we're doing on season 3? Because in season 2 we were doing questions.
I'm having a great time.
And it was like an interview.
Not complaining.
And then Dora was like, "No, Amy, we want to have a little bit more of the Amy on. Let's take it more to a conversation."
Generally, if you bring up the philosopher, the figure of the philosopher does not function in this conversation as a vehicle of thought. It's a very animalistic, purely sexual figure in this conversation, which is an interesting twist. It's unexpected, It's not like I had a friend who was a philosopher and we talked about Plato and then we're going to be talking about Plato. So Jerry, what do you think about Plato? It's like you remind me of this person I had sex with, and he's a philosopher, but that's incidental, right? Him being a philosopher in a way, it's really him being a sexual agent.
No, No, what I said was, incidentally, he was a philosopher. And that what came to mind was this thing from like my working class parents when I went off to college. It was like, you're going to go study something practical. And ultimately, I ended up going to law school and it was like practical. But now, like, and I've gone to 2 of your lectures, it's like philosophy has so much relevance for our lives today and for processing this stuff.
Of course it does.
And it's different than psychology and the whole like trauma industry.
Right.
And maybe, we'll just cut to the questions. Dor, we're still striking a balance, right? You wanted a little bit less of just the straight. We used to do like a straight shot interview format, and it was really
no. But
Q&A.
I like what I think. I think this might be the best podcast ever.
Welcome to this week's edition of
Solid Gold.
We had invited Dr. Jeremy Fogel onto Solid Gold, but it was frankly unshareable. So we're going to do it on our own.
It was like dirty and maybe הפוך על הפוך. I don't know how to say it in proper English.
It was like, it was like reverse psychology, like reverse psychology. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I think it is.
It's like the upside down.
Actually, I love this commercial, but I think it's not, it's inappropriate.
I feel like, it's a little too risky, a little dicey. Isn't that great? Now you guys are all going to be like, what did he say?
Because I heard that their jewelry... That's what I heard. I heard that it literally like that's literally that Zehavi they were called. I literally been told that it.
Maybe we can describe the gentleman on this episode if you want to talk about fashion.
Jeremy has fantastic fashion. He's not here, actually. He just left. So this is going to be a surprise for him. I love the way that Jeremy dresses. He does a sock in, a sandal slide, like an Adidas sandal slide. No, a flip-flop door is when it has the little thing between the big toe and the second toe.
Okay.
But the Adidas style is called a slide because you slide your foot into it.
Ooh,
Isn't that great? I
is.
love a good slide.
But let's speak about
Jeremy. Getting back to Jeremy. He usually wears a button-down shirt. He's quite tall.
Very tall.
Very tall. He's taller than you, I think.
No, I think we are the same. But he's more like... his body is more present in it, like it's more solid, like solid gold.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but it's not hard for him to be more solid than you. You are pretty lanky.
Okay, what else? He have a necklace and glasses, and he has this great hair.
Great hair. Great head of hair.
He's a very impressive man.
Yes, he is. He's a very attractive, very intelligent man. Visit sahavjewelry.com for gold body jewelry made in New York. If you don't have a piercing, it's not a problem. Use discount code DOOR24 for an additional 35% off your entire order. If you use this coupon code and it's your first time purchasing, they'll even throw in a free pair of solid gold 14-karat earrings with your first order. And completely unrelated to jewelry and everything, I just want to say rest in peace, Richard Lewis. And thanks for listening to this week's episode of Solid Gold. Stay shiny. Did you know that Herzl was really into Wagner?
Was he?
Yeah.
Sexually, you mean?
Sex sells, doesn't it?
Does it? I think somewhat, Herzl. You know that Herzl was manic depressive?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Not only that, the Herzl family is a terrible, tragic story. Yeah, you don't.
I read the biography. I know. Why don't you tell her?
Well, he was manic depressive, and basically, a few weeks even before he embraced Zionism, he thought it was a ridiculous idea, and then he had this mania. In June, he's writing like mathematical calculations in his journals, just to make sure that he's sane, because he has all these great ideas. He's going to be a world figure. He's going to be a grand leader. And so essentially, really in a way, Israel is the result of the manic episode, of an epic manic episode from by Theodore. His wife was in and out of mental institutions. His daughter died from opium overdose, which was rarer at the time than it is now. Her brother, his son, killed himself when she died. I think he had another daughter that was murdered by the Nazis, but she too had mental health issues, and her son killed himself. So it's a very somber, pretty dark family history.
There's no continuation of his bloodline.
No, everybody's either dead or, from suicide or, otherwise.
I want to ask you about the philosophy thing now, but I also wanted to ask you if you've seen the movie Zone of Interest. Did you hear about this movie?
No.
It's a new movie from Jonathan Glazer. Just saw it last week. And it's a Holocaust movie, but not in the traditional sense of a Holocaust movie.
I've heard about it.
Have you heard about it? I don't want to give any spoilers, but I was just curious as to whether you've seen it. It's fantastic. Everyone should go see it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or, watch it at home.
Sure.
But philosophy.
Yes.
Mr. Philosopher.
Philosopher. Oh, Mr. Philosopher.
Dr. Philosopher. Do you feel comfortable calling yourself doctor, or do you have
actually I think for some I went to visit a friend, so I haven't flown in a long time, and you have Mr. and Mrs. Doctor on the plane ticket. So that's the first, I think it was the first time I flew as a doctor, and I was thinking, what do you? Why is that thing there? It's such random.
On a plane of all places, they're going to be like, is there a doctor on the plane? Is there a doctor on the plane? And then she'll look at the list of the Dr. Fogel, Dr. Fogel.
I think they say professor also. You can choose your academic, rank on the plane ticket, which is weird. Why would it be relevant?
I'm also a doctor, by the way.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm a Juris Doctor.
Oh, wow.
There was an ethics decision in New York that I can call myself. There was a lawyer in New York City, and he was like, I want to call myself a doctor too. And then people were like, no, you shouldn't, blah, blah, blah. There was an ethics decision. Ruling is, I can call myself doctor. My sister's actually a medical doctor.
Is she?
Yeah, so I feel like
there's a lawyer
calling
and a
myself
doctor
and a vet.
And a vet.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, your parents must be proud.
They are proud.
I'm sure they are.
There's 2 more brothers also who are doing great things. So,
are they?
Yeah.
Oh.
But I'm not really practicing as a lawyer anymore. But anyway,
sure.
Dr. Philosopher.
Yes.
How can philosophy enrich our lives and help us deal with this maelstrom of emotions and intellectual complexity?
Well, I think that generally speaking, the philosophy has, this is something also that I was thinking in this, awful times that we're living here at the moment. If philosophy can't respond to times of crisis, then really it has very little value. I think that if philosophy doesn't actually bring something existential to the table, then it's not the kind of philosophy that I'm really interested in. It's certainly not the kind of philosophy that, for example, the originative philosophers of the Western tradition in ancient Greece were interested in. Epicurus, it's weird because I'm always giving these lectures in Hebrew, so now I have to find the words in English, but Epicurus has this very beautiful phrase where he says, just like there's no value in medicine if it doesn't expel the suffering of the body, so there's no value in philosophy if it doesn't expel the suffering from the mind. And that's something that it's a sentiment I very much agree with. Nietzsche says something rather similar when he says that the only examination of philosophical ideas that carries any meaning is the question of whether someone can live in their light. If not, it's just words upon words upon words. It's just empty criticisms of words. He thinks, incidentally, that's what academic philosophy is mainly about, right? It's just this, maybe joy, it might be a satisfying cognitive masturbation of some kind. It could be like some chess game that scholars play with each other, but it doesn't carry the existential meaning, the profound, life-changing, life-altering meaning that philosophy should be carrying in Nietzsche's perspective, which is a very ancient Greek perspective. In ancient Greece, the philosophers, you were a philosopher not so much by virtue of proposing some new theoretical construct, certainly not in virtue of having done a degree where I, look at me, I got like an A+ on my class in ethics, but I'm an asshole. But I got an A+ on my class, or I flunked metaphysics. That's not at all the kind of activity we're talking about. The kind of activity they were engaging is much nearer to what maybe we would think of as a spiritual path or a religious sect of some kind, not in the negative connotation of the word sect, in the sense of an attempt at living a life that is good and meaningful and fulfilling. These were the originative questions and inquiries philosophers were engaged in. And I think that for philosophy to remain relevant, and I think it is, or it can be, because there's many different kind of philosophical activities that people can be engaged with. But the kind of philosophy that I'm most interested in, I think, and that most people are interested in, is those that do address these issues that you raise, and I think, for example, for me, in this period, the philosophers that I like to go back to and read are the Stoic philosophers. So I've been going back and reading them and talking about them. And, when they asked me to give lectures at, refugees from the north or whoever other groups was asked to lecture to, I thought, what can I be talking about in these times? And I thought that the Stoic philosophers give the most inspiring or appropriate or helpful, useful answers at this time.
Remind me, the Stoics were around 2,000 years ago?
Yes, indeed. Well, it's a long and storied school of thought, really, because it starts in the 4th century, Zenon, in the 4th century before the Common Era, and it keeps on going up to the Roman times until really Christianity takes over. And then it has a very formative impact on Christianity, and it remains an incredibly important source for Western thought more generally. But that's kind of the time where it was like a living, vibrant tradition that people actually lived, And I mentioned Epicure, who's the kind of intellectual or philosophical rival of the Stoics. But both very much agree that philosophy is not about advancing new abstract theories. It's not even about, in a sense, seeking the best or most cogent argument. It's about living a philosophical life. It's living in a certain way. They saw Socrates as Socrates himself, of course, didn't think of himself as a Stoic. He was Socrates, but they think of Socrates as kind of an existential hero. And a lot of their wisdom, a lot of their advice, a lot of their directives, existential directives are, I think, deeply appropriate for the current period and for times of uncertainty and times of suffering and pain and cruelty, which they would, I think, pretty rightly say is, generally speaking, the human lot,
I've often thought of myself as a modern Epicurean, but I really do find some solace amongst like the Stoic.
The one, I had this one thing that gave me like a Satori moment, where I was like, it literally released something in me, is that I read this quote by Seneca where he says that just like the soldier is tied with a chain to the prisoner he's carrying around, so fear and hope are tied together. They might seem like very different phenomenon, but really they are both symptoms of a mind that is not at rest, that is not at ease, right? And I think that's a very profound thought. I think that in Israel in particular, maybe more generally speaking in the West, we have this thing now where hope is really important. Hope is terribly important. We need hope to survive. It's a thing you find a lot in various Jewish sources. The Messiah, we're a messianic religion, right? So the Messiah will come. There's the hope for the Messiah. Next year in Jerusalem, Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim HaBnuya, in the rebuilt Jerusalem, the anthem, the Israeli anthem is the hope, Hatikva, right? And here Seneca says that hope is a nefarious thing. It's a symptom of not being in the present, not being in a